For 15 years, he hadn't sought the company of anything that breathed. He had his horse, a mountain of firewood, and a Sharps rifle that he kept cleaner than his own soul. Silas was 60, but the mountains make a man feel a century old. His hands were mapped with scars, reminders of a life spent hunting men for the Pinkertons, a life he'd walked away from when the blood started tasting like his own. He thought the world had forgotten him. He hoped it had. Hit that subscribe button and give this story a like. It helps us keep the campfire burning. Now, let's get back to the mountain. But the mountains don't forget, and they don't forgive. It was a Tuesday when the wind changed. It carried the scent of wet pine and something else, something that didn't belong at 6,000 feet, gunpowder, not the fresh snap of a hunter's rifle, but the stale, burnt stench of a desperate firefight. Silas didn't reach for his coat. He reached for his iron. He stepped onto the porch just as the storm broke, and that's when he saw her. She wasn't walking. She was stumbling, a shadow against the gray curtain of the coming snow. She wore a dress of silk that had been shredded by manzanita thorns. Just a woman losing a race against the cold. Silas watched her collapse 50 yards from his door. She didn't scream. She didn't pray. She just folded into the dirt like a broken bird. He stayed still for a heartbeat. His mind told him to go back inside, to bolt the door and let the mountains take what they had claimed. But his hands, the ones that had taken so much life, moved on their own. He picked her up. She was light, far too light, her skin the color of ash and just as cold. Inside, the cabin was a fortress of wood and shadow. He laid her on the rug before the hearth and went to work. He didn't ask questions. You don't ask a dying person for their name. He built the fire until the stove glowed cherry red. He boiled water. He tore up a clean shirt to bind the wound he found on her shoulder, a graze from a high-caliber round that had taken a piece of her, but not enough to kill her. Not yet. As the heat hit her, she began to shake. Not just the tremors of the cold, but the deep, bone-rattling shivers of a person who has seen the bottom of the grave. She opened her eyes. They were green, the color of the deep forest, but they were wide with a terror that Silas recognized. It was the look of the hunted. "Don't let him in," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Silas sat in his rocking chair, the rifle across his knees. "The only thing coming through that door is the wind," he said, "and the wind doesn't carry a badge or a gun." 3 days passed. The storm outside turned the world white and silent. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar smoke and bitter coffee. Silas made the way he liked it. Strong enough to chew. The woman's name was Elena. She didn't offer much else. She spent the first 2 days in a fever, muttering about the ledger and a man named Julian Thorne. Silas knew the name. Everyone in the territory knew Thorne. He was a man who owned judges the way other men own cattle. By the 4th morning, Elena was sitting up. She wore one of Silas's wool shirts. The sleeves rolled up past her thin wrists. She watched him work. She watched the way he moved, slow, deliberate, like a man who had learned that sudden movements usually ended in a funeral. "You're not a rancher," she said, watching him sharpen a skinning knife. "I'm a man who wants to be left alone," Silas replied. He didn't look up. "There's a difference." "Thorne will find me," she said. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the coffee tin. "He thinks I took something. Something that belongs to him." "Did you?" Elena looked at the fire. The light danced in her green eyes. "I took my life back. To a man like Thorne, that's the same as theft." Silas nodded. He'd seen it before. Men who thought they could own the air and the people who breathed it. He went to the stove and poured 2 cups. He didn't offer comfort. Comfort was a lie in the high country. Instead, he gave her the only thing he had. "The snow is 6 feet deep on the pass," Silas said. "Nobody is coming up that road for a week. Not Thorne, not the devil himself. You eat, you get your strength, then you go. And if I can't, then you'll be a permanent part of the mountain." A small smile touched her lips. It was the first time she had looked human instead of like a ghost. "You're a hard man, Silas Vance." "Hard ground keeps the boots dry," he muttered. "But the mountain has a way of betraying you." On the 6th day, the sun came out blinding and cruel, and with the sun came the sound of hooves. Silas was out back, splitting wood. He heard the rhythm. 3 horses. Heavy. These weren't mountain ponies. These were city-bred stallions, pushed hard. He dropped the axe and stepped into the cabin. Elena was standing by the window, her face pale. "It's him." Silas didn't say a word. He went to the wall, took down the sharps, and checked the chamber. He moved Elena to the root cellar. "Stay quiet. If you hear more than one shot, you stay down there until the fire goes out." He stepped onto the porch just as the 3 riders cleared the tree line. In the lead was Julian Thorne. He didn't look like an outlaw. He wore a charcoal suit and a silk cravat. His black hair slicked back under a flat-brimmed hat. He looked like a man who had never had dirt under his fingernails. His 2 companions, however, were built of nothing but dirt and malice. Thorne pulled his horse to a stop 20 yards out. He looked at the cabin, then at Silas. He smiled, but his eyes stayed cold, the eyes of a shark. "Mr. Vance," Thorne called out. "I was told by a man of your reputation was hiding out here. I'm looking for a piece of property. A girl, green eyes, a habit of running." Silas leveled the sharps. He didn't aim at Thorne. He aimed at the lead horse's chest. "You're trespassing on private land, Mr. Thorne, and the Sierra has a very short memory for visitors." Thorne's smile didn't flicker. "I'm a reasonable man. Silas, give her to me, and I'll forget I ever saw this cabin. I might even pay you for the trouble. A man in retirement could always use a bit of gold." "I don't like gold," Silas said. "It's too heavy to carry when you're burying bodies." The 2 gunmen shifted in their saddles, their hands hovering over their holsters. The air in the clearing turned brittle. It was that moment, the one that happens in the West right before the world turns to lead and smoke. If you're still here, listening to this tale of the high country, it means you've got the heart of a pioneer. If you want to know if Silas Vance can hold off the darkness one more time, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button and give the story a like. Thorne looked at the rifle, then at Silas's eyes. He saw something there that made him pause. He saw a man who had already died once and wasn't afraid to do it again. "A week," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The snow will melt enough for a wagon soon. I'll be back, Silas, and I won't be asking next time." He turned his horse and rode away, his gunman following. Silas didn't lower the rifle until the sound of the hooves had vanished. He went inside and pulled Elena from the cellar. She was shaking, her eyes wide. "He'll come back," she said. "I know," Silas replied. That night, the cabin felt different. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a weight. Silas sat by the fire, cleaning the sharps again. Elena sat on the floor near his feet. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "I knew a girl once," Silas said, his voice heavy. "In Tennessee, during the war. She asked for help, and I gave her a reason why I couldn't. I've been living with that reason for 40 years. I decided I was tired of it." Elena reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was warm now. "You're a good man, Silas." "Don't go saying things you can't prove," he muttered. Over the next 2 days, the tension grew. Silas prepared. He didn't just clean guns. He set lines. He knew Thorne would come at night. He knew he wouldn't come alone. Elena helped. She cooked. She cleaned. She moved with a grace that seemed to settle the jagged edges of Silas's mind. For the first time in 15 years, the cabin felt like a home instead of a cage. He found himself looking at her when she wasn't watching. He found himself thinking about what it would be like if the snow never melted. On the 3rd night, the moon was a silver coin over the peaks. The air was dead still. Silas was standing by the window when Elena walked up behind him. She put her arms around his waist. "Silas," she whispered, "I'm scared." "I've got you," he said, and he meant it. He turned to face her, the moonlight catching the tears in her eyes. "Just pretend you love me for 1 minute," she coaxed, her voice a soft, melodic lure. "Just so I can remember what it feels like before the end." Silas felt a crack in the armor he had worn for decades. He looked at her, the green eyes, the soft curve of her mouth. He leaned in, his heart thumping like a muffled drum. He closed his eyes and leaned in to kiss her, and that's when he felt it. Not the warmth of her lips, but the bite of cold, hard steel against his ribs. Silas froze. He didn't open his eyes for a second. He just felt the circular pressure of a Derringer barrel pressed firmly into his side. "Don't move, Silas," Elena said. Her voice wasn't soft anymore. It was as sharp as a razor. He opened his eyes. The green forest was gone. In its place was a predatory glint that made his blood run cold. She wasn't shaking. Her hand was as steady as a mountain. "The ledger," Silas whispered. "Thorne doesn't have it," Elena said, her face inches from his. "I do, but he has the key. We've been playing this game for a long time. Silas, he sends me in to find a soft spot, a man with a secret, a man with a cabin that's hard to find." The door of the cabin creaked open. Julian Thorne stepped in, followed by his gunman. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked bored. "Well done, Elena," Thorne said. He walked over to Silas's gun rack and began tossing the rifles onto the floor. "The broken girl act gets them every time, especially the ones with regrets." Silas looked at Elena. "The wound on your shoulder?" "A prop," she said, her eyes never leaving him. "Thorne is a decent shot when he wants to be. It looked real enough to get me through the door, didn't it?" Thorne laughed. Silas, you were a Pinkerton. You should know that the prettiest flowers in the West are always the ones that kill you." Thorne sat at the table and poured himself a cup of Silas's coffee. He spat it out immediately. "God, that's foul. Where is it, Vance?" "The map to the silver vein you found back in '74. The one you stole from the company." Silas felt a grim satisfaction. "So that's what this is. You think I've got a map?" "We know you do," Elena hissed, pressing the Derringer harder into his ribs. "Tell him, or I'll let this little toy go off. It's a small bullet, Silas. It won't kill you fast. It'll just tear up your insides while you watch us burn this place down." Silas took a deep breath. He looked around his cabin, the wood he had cut, the life he had built. He looked at the girl he had tried to save. "You're right, Elena," Silas said. "I am a hard man, but I'm not a stupid one." Silas didn't reach for the gun. He reached for the table. With a roar, he flipped the heavy oak table. The coffee pot flew, scalding Thorne. In the confusion, Silas dived to the left. Crack! The Derringer went off. The bullet grazed Silas's hip, a white-hot iron of pain. But he didn't stop. He rolled behind the wood stove. "Kill him!" Thorne screamed, clutching his face. The two gunmen opened fire. The cabin was filled with the deafening roar of 6 guns. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Silas reached under the floorboard behind the stove, where he kept his real insurance. He pulled out a sawed-off 10-gauge shotgun. The first gunman rounded the corner. Silas didn't give him a chance to speak. The 10-gauge roared, a wall of lead that sent the man flying back to the front door. The second gunman fired, a bullet catching Silas in the shoulder, spinning him around. Silas gritted his teeth, leveled his shotgun with one hand, and emptied the second barrel. The man slumped against the gun rack, dead before he hit the floor. Silence returned to the cabin, thick with the smell of sulfur. Silas stood up, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He looked at the doorway. Thorne was gone. Elena was gone. He stumbled onto the porch. The moonlight showed them, 2 figures running for the horses. "Elena!" Silas roared. She turned, her face a mask of fury. She raised the Derringer. Silas didn't use the shotgun. He didn't have time to reload. He reached into his boot and pulled the skinning knife. He didn't think about Tennessee. He didn't think about regrets. He threw. The knife caught Elena in the thigh. She screamed and fell into the snow. Thorne didn't look back. He scrambled onto his horse and dug his spurs in, disappearing into the dark woods. He was a man of business, and the business had gone bad. Silas walked down the steps, trailing blood in the snow. He stood over Elena. She was clutching her leg, the silk dress stained dark. "Wait," she gasped. "Silas, wait. He made me do it. I can help you. The ledger, it's worth thousands." Silas looked down at her. He didn't see a girl. He didn't see a victim. He saw the West. Cold, beautiful, and heartless. You asked me to pretend I loved you for a minute, Silas said, his voice as cold as the peaks. The minute's up. Silas didn't kill her. He wasn't that kind of man anymore. He bandaged her leg, tied her to the remaining horse, and led her down the mountain to the nearest town with a jailhouse. When the sun rose the next morning, Silas Vance was back at his cabin. It was a mess. The table was broken. The windows were gone. Blood stained the floorboards. He sat in his rocking chair, the mountain wind whistling through the holes in his walls. He held a cup of coffee. It was bitter. It was strong. It was exactly what he deserved. He had tried to find a piece of his humanity in a girl who had none to give. It was a lesson the West taught every man eventually. You don't get to trade your past for a pretty face. You just have to live with it until the fire goes out. Thorne was still out there. Silas knew he'd come back. Men like that always do. But Silas would be ready. He had new windows to build and a floor to scrub. The mountain was quiet again, but it wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of a man who had heard his own heartbeat and realized it was still thumping. Life in the West isn't about the gold you find or the people you save. It's about the grit it takes to stand up after the world has kicked you in the ribs. If this story meant something to you, tell us about it in the comments. Where are you listening from tonight? And if you want to ride with us on the next trail, hit that subscribe button. Out here, the stories never truly end. They just wait for the next storm.